Good evening, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of Karis Circle. Karis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Karis Books, and Karis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are delighted to be here with all of you tonight, celebrating Writers on Abortion Now. This panel features Hannah Matthews as our moderator, Alana Edmondson, who is a contributor to Shout Your Abortion, Natalie Lim, contributor to Sex and the Single Woman, and Nicole Walker, contributor to Choice Words. Obviously, this is a topic that is close to our hearts here in Atlanta, and to all of you watching around the world. I am sure wherever you're living, this is more and more urgent by the day. Tonight's event is co-sponsored by Access Reproductive Care Southeast, also known as ARC Southeast. They are a reproductive justice organization based in Atlanta that funds abortion and builds power in the region. They provide funding and logistical support to ensure Southerners receive safe and compassionate reproductive care, including abortion services. Through education and leadership development, they build power in communities of color to abolish stigma and restore dignity and justice. Since 2016, ARC Southeast has completed nearly 26,000 intakes for Southerners living in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Tennessee. And we are very honored to be a longtime partner of ARC Southeast and lift up their work. That's just, one of the main folks here in the South doing daily reproductive and abortion access work. And so we're very honored to have them be with us tonight. We're very honored to have all of y'all watching in the chat. We want to let you know we've already got one great question here. You may ask a question at any time, and Hannah will weave them in as it makes sense. So just put them in the Ask a Question tab or in the chat, and we will figure out how to work those in. But I want to go ahead and get out of the way because I know we got so much to talk about. So thank you all very much for being here. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your words. We are really honored to get to do this with you tonight.
All right. Thank you so much, ER. I'm Hannah, she, her. I am a white, cis, queer, disabled, diabetic, abortion doula, care worker, writer. My book on community abortion care is going to be published next year in May. And I have a newsletter of abortion love letters, if that's of interest to anyone. It's called Bringing Down the Flowers, and the link is in my bio if anyone is needing some abortion love letters for themselves, their community, their loved ones. So I'm going to start. I'm going to introduce all these brilliant writers. I'm so honored to be here with Karis, which is a dream, and in partnership with ARC Southeast, which is an organization near and dear to my heart. So I'll start with Alana Edmondson. Alana is a PhD student in English at Yale University and a longtime advocate for the right to an abortion. Alana has worked with Planned Parenthood and NARAL and has interviewed about abortion with the New York Times, CNN, and Vice, among other publications. Alana primarily works with Shout Your Abortion, which is an amazing organization fighting stigma and telling stories in all kinds of incredible, necessary, urgent ways. And Alana's contributed one of the many abortion stories in the Shout Your Abortion anthology, which you all should buy from Karis. I think there's a link in the event description. And she has had 2 abortions that she is very grateful for. And I'm very grateful to be standing in her light tonight. And then my girl, Natalie Lima, is a Cuban, Puerto Rican writer and graduate of the MFA program in creative nonfiction writing at the University of Arizona. Her essays in fiction have been published in Longreads, Guernica, Catapult, Brevity, The Offing, Body Language, which is a Catapult anthology, Sex and the Single Woman, which is a Harper Perennial anthology. And I've read every single one, and they're all incredible, and you should all read every single one too. And she's received fellowships from the Pan America Emerging Voices, Bread Loaf Writers Conference, Tin House, the Vona Voices Workshop, Hedgebrook, and elsewhere. Heavy hitter. Natalie is currently working on a memoir, and you can find her on Instagram and on Twitter at Natalie Lima 09. And finally, we have Nicole Walker. Nicole is the author of 8 books, most recently Processed Meats, Essays on Food, Flesh, and Navigating Disaster, Sustainability, A Love Story, and the collaborative collection, The After Normal, Brief Alphabetical Essays on a Changing Planet. She is the co-president of Nonfiction Now, the recipient of a National Endowment for the Arts Award, and a noted author in Best American Essays. Her work has been most recently published in the New York Times, Long Reads, the Georgia Review, and the Southern Review, among other places. She teaches at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, and she serves as the Crux series editor for the University of Georgia Press. So welcome, Alana, Natalie, and Nicole. I'm so honored to stand in all your light and be here with you, holding space for all your stories and in conversation. Before I start asking questions and fielding questions from the audience, I kind of want to ground us in some basic agreements, because it is a conversation about abortion. Language around abortion is always evolving, it's always shifting, and also I, as a care worker, will always mirror whatever language someone would like to use about their own abortion experience. So, if you hear language about abortion that doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. If you hear language used that you wouldn't use, that's okay. And there are some basic guidelines. I would like to always use gender inclusive language. I talk about pregnant people. I don't talk about women. We ground our language in anti-racism and in the framework of reproductive justice, which the Sister Song Women of Color Collective defines as the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, have children, not have children, and parent the children we have in safe and sustainable communities. And another basic guideline I'd like to ground us in is we don't conflate legality with morality or safety. And especially as, we are seeing state violence and criminalization of pregnant people really escalate and accelerate right now. Just acknowledging and deferring to the folks most impacted, who have always been most impacted and who have always been the leaders, fighting for our ability to even have this conversation, which is especially Black women in the South, Black and Indigenous people and other people of color, people who are undocumented, trans folks. And so even though we are seeing that net widen, I just want to make sure, I am white, I am cis, and I live in a high access place. And so the limitations of my lived experience are in the room with us. And if you are also bringing your own social location to your conversation or your questions, just please remember that that's in the room with us as well. So all that being said, I'd love to start and just also encourage everyone on the panel and in the audience to practice care for yourself. I know that we're all pretty traumatized right now. And I think especially for folks who've had abortions, folks who may need abortion care, that trauma is living in our bodies, especially at this moment. And so I really encourage you, if you need to step away, if you need to take a break, if you need to shift the conversation, please do. And I'm going to start with a question that I think we may have lost Alana, hopefully, or maybe I just can't see Alana, but I'm going to start with a conversation that is just general, kick it to all of you, which is, reading all of your beautiful pieces, I was really reminded that there is no single abortion narrative. And, despite our culture really trying to flatten abortion and silo it and make it this one big, scary, uniform thing, there's no single narrative. And the only expert on any given abortion is the person who's having that abortion. And so everyone has their own relationship to their own abortion experiences. And I am curious if your relationship to your own abortion experiences, what it was before you wrote about them, how the act of writing them maybe change that relationship, and what you feel like your relationship to your abortion experiences is now on the other side of that. So Natalie, if you want to kick us off.
Hi. I feel a little nervous. I hope it's okay to say that. But I feel like my relationship with abortion has gotten more, well, it's always evolving, but it certainly feels like it's gotten more maybe radical over the last few years, especially because I had an abortion at 18, but also more recently. And so something has shifted with this two different experiences with me now reaching like the last years of my childbearing years. And so it feels like my level of access has changed, people's opinions change on the whole thing. So there's a lot of shifting with it for me, but essentially I feel like as far left on the issue as I can get. And when people ask if you're a one issue voter, it's become like the one issue that I feel the most passionate about. So I guess writing it as a nonfiction writer, it always helps take some shame out of it for me. And then also doing that helps me share it publicly in a way that kind of takes shame away. And it makes me feel the heaviness that I used to feel in my 20s, you know, being just navigating the space and having gone through, you know, having had an abortion in my late teens. I think that's sort of shifted and completely gone. And now that I'm writing about it, it feels like, I don't know, like a new open space now. I don't know if any of that just made sense, but all the shame has left, thankfully. And that might be because of me being a writer, because of society evolving, a combination of all of it, because of my maturity. So I don't know, it might be a combo of all of it.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's really beautiful and like expansive and makes total sense to me. Alana, do you need me to repeat the question or put it in the chat for you, or did you hear it?
Okay. I did not hear the question. I would love a rephrase.
Okay, absolutely. So my question was, everyone has their own personal, you know, very specific relationship to their abortion experiences, and every abortion is different. And so my question was, what was your relationship to your abortion experiences before writing about them? And how did the act of writing about them change that relationship, if it did?
Ew, that's actually a really fun question. I would say that, I mean, I had my first abortion when I was 21. And, you know, I was still like kind of, you know, I guess I was still in a position like religiously where I didn't know how I felt about it. You know, I was like, essentially, I like to say like I was one book away from like losing my religion. And like that book kind of was like my abortion, to be honest. Or something that I read during that. I mean, it was very much like a transformative experience. And so yeah. So I had to like realize my first pregnancy, it was like, am I freezing? It doesn't matter. I'm frozen on my screen, but that's not important. But I feel like for me, it was, you know, initially I was like, I don't want to kill anybody, but I also am not ready to be a mother. And I had to kind of have like this like self-negotiation where I recognized that, or, you know, I guess I had to like make decisions for myself. Like it couldn't be decided by my parents or by my religion. I had to make a decision for myself, a critical decision for myself and for my future. And I would say I actually kind of forgot the question, but I think, you know, the difference between that experience and, you know, my second abortion, which was like 7 years later when I was 28, and like, you know, I had a good job, like I was making good money, like had a, you know, great community. And still I had to be like, you know, actually I think like, you know, as a Black woman, I don't think this is the move for me right now. And that's that, you know, there was no religion involved. It was like, it was sad. But I had to like kind of just like decide, like, I mean, you know, I wanted to get my PhD at an Ivy League school, and now I'm talking to you from Yale. And yeah, I don't know, it probably sucks more than having a kid. I don't know. But you know, I mean, it's important that we just have access to what we want to have access to. I had to like, you know, I was a book away from like losing my religion the first time I don't know, my abortions are kind of like very, I don't know. They're very, it's, you know, they kind of, I guess, create a snapshot in time, and I can really see exactly what I was prioritizing. And I'm happy to say that I prioritized myself, my health, my happiness, the future of my family, the future of like, you know, our ancestral line or whatever, even if I don't decide to have kids, like I've used this time to like, you know, go to therapy, get a psychiatrist, like, you know, do some yoga, travel, learn all about the different kinds of racism that there are in the world. And there's so many different flavors. And, you know, I've just dedicated my life to that. So I just, you know, there's so much to look forward to.
Yes, that's so powerful. And I mean, you did a brilliant job of answering my question. And I have not gotten a PhD from Yale, but I imagine that you are working harder than I am, I think, as a parent. So any parents with PhDs who want to chime in about which is harder. But I also think, you know, you made a beautiful point when you said like prioritizing your lineage and your ancestral line, even if you don't give birth and parent, you know, abortion can be an act of parenting yourself. It can be an act of parenting children you are one day going to have, maybe, or, you know, parenting those future possibilities and possible lives. And also going back and parenting, you know, parents and grandparents who didn't have the choice, and kind of like, you know, mothering our mothers and parenting our parents in that way. So yeah, that really resonated with me. Nicole, what do you think?
For me, my relationship, if you read my piece in Choice Words, I talk about having had 2 abortions, one when I was 11, one when I was 21. I've lived with abortion my whole life. I've always tried to write about it in a way that's not like icky, right? Like the stigma around abortion is similar to me, the stigma around talking about, you know, having your period or losing your, you know, a left arm. Like it's a gory description, not necessarily one that was steeped in shame, although of course it was, right? But I was, you know, I just didn't know how exactly to approach writing about it without making it super clinical or super graphic. So, but to me, the thing that changed my relationship to abortion was the Dobbs decision. My understanding of what happened to me, any shame, as Natalie said, fell away. I was like, fuck this shit. This is my life and this is happening. Shame was no longer even in my vocabulary. It was nothing but anger and concern for anybody who wants to have any kind of body autonomy, any sort of direction for their life. As Alana says, you know, she chose a life. She wanted to go to Yale. She wanted to get a PhD. To the idea that that could no longer be an option for so many people is mind-blowing to me. And the only good thing that's happened since Dobbs is the word abortion is flooding the newspapers and Twitter and Facebook. People are saying it loud and proud. And I think there's been a change in what is shame and a willingness of people to stand up and say, I've had abortion. I know people have had abortion. I'm going to use the word abortion 400 times a day because we're done with that shit. We are done with it being shameful, and our relationship to our abortion can range from sadness to complete perfunctory. It was like getting a tooth pulled, and if you want to go on that degree of feeling about what your abortion was, that's okay, because we are, I think, here to say that our bodies are no longer subject to your determining how we should feel about them.
Yes. Thank you so much, Nicole. Yeah, exactly. There's no right way to have an abortion. There's no right way to feel about an abortion. There's no right reason to have an abortion. Like the only perfect reason to have an abortion is whatever reason you have. And same with, you know, whatever abortion experience you desire or need or imagine for yourself. That's the perfect abortion experience for you. That actually kind of leads me to a question I had for Alana, which is, you write so beautifully and so movingly about the grief you felt and the loss aspect of ending your pregnancies, you know, alongside the relief, the joy, the energy, all of that, the power. And I'm wondering, I feel like sometimes folks who are moving through pro-abortion spaces and especially activism and advocacy spaces feel some pressure to kind of downplay, you know, that grief or loss or any nuance around that, because those things have been so effectively weaponized by the anti-abortion movement, right? Where abortion is tragic and it's death and killing, and they flatten it to that. And so I'm just wondering if that was always a no-brainer for you to just kind of honor every emotion and every sensation in your whole experience, or if that ever presented a challenge, or you ever felt pressure to downplay that in your public facing activism.
That's a great question. I think it was, I mean, the first time, my first abortion, I mean, I was 21, super religious family. I talked to my dad about it. My dad was like, honey, you have options. I talked to my mom about it, and I was like, what would you do? And she was like, I would have it. So I was like, okay, well, let me just really pray about this. Maybe talk to the rest of my siblings. I don't know. I really I asked my family was like a part of the experience, I suppose, which made it, I think, not easier, but more of a sound decision for me. But yeah, my second one, I was 28. It was sad. I was really sad. And the first one, like, you know, it didn't hurt physically. I had a nice talk with like the Planned Parenthood staff while it was happening. You know, I think at the time I was telling her about like, you know, my graduate school plans and whatever. And she was like, yeah, I got an abortion when I was in med school. Like, I get it. And I was like, cool, brilliant. And it was like a pain-free experience. And, you know, I was just happy to like experience my 22nd birthday and not be pregnant, you know? But, you know, the next time it was sad. I was mourning for like a good 6 months. Like, it was not like, I would have loved to have like decided to be a mother at that time. And I could have made the decision, But instead, I had to look out for future me. And I had to make a decision for future me, and also for future, like, plural me, I don't know, like for my offspring and what, So I don't know. I think that people, and I feel, okay, I feel like some people kind of downplay or don't even think about like the actual emotional experience. And I mean, that's obviously like patriarchal in nature. Like, it's like women can't make decisions. If they do, it's to say, fuck you, dude. That's not really like how, that's not how we work. Um, if we're saying fuck you, there's a reason. But, um, yeah, I don't know. I think that, I've been seeing online like people, I guess conservatives who like have like been anti-Roe, and then like, they're retweeting stories about like, some woman who like has an ectopic pregnancy and has to like sit in a hospital and wait until she's like almost dead enough for her to legally matter, and they're like, well, this isn't what we thought would happen. And it's like, well, that makes one of us. I don't know. It's hard. I don't know. It just feels like some of us have been predicting the future forever, and some of us are just figuring out what future means and how we spell it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did I answer the
agree.
question?
It can be. You did. Yeah. No, I feel like I was so so moved by the way you wrote about, your emotional connection to your pregnancies, because that's something, I have felt some pressure to, because abortion has been so politicized, to only share the ways in which my abortion experiences were easy and positive and joyful. And they absolutely were. And also I grieve, the pregnancy I ended every day. And I feel a lot of, there are a lot of emotions coming to the table. We're all eating together. I'm not going to pretend like I don't see some of them. So yeah, so thank you so much for sharing. So I also wanted to ask kind of all of you just generally, what the reception has been to your writing about your abortion and your telling these stories in this medium, which is like, goes beyond our communities and the rooms in which we might normally tell these stories. And if you expected certain kinds of reception that you haven't gotten from readers, or, just if it's been different than you expected, or just what that has looked like for you since these pieces have been published.
Am I vocal?
You can start. I'm throwing this to all of you, but I can assign if it's easier. I know sometimes it's hard to like volunteer.
I just had to make sure that I was still like, yeah, I'm having a fun time with the internet.
Yeah.
I'm not a woman in STEM.
Yes.
But so I would say, I mean, for me, like, I don't know, for Shout Your Abortion, like, we just did like the most recent action that we did together, or that I was present for, was we did like a lemonade stand at the Supreme Court on the 4th of July. And, we like handed out lemonade and water and popsicles, and handed out information about abortion pills and how how people could, request them for themselves and also for people they might know. in other states. Not a suggestion, but an idea, you know? So we had like, you know, we've been doing little things like this that feel, you know, I guess like kind of classically American, but also like, you know, like a lemonade stand. I don't know. It feels very, I don't know. I'm not an Americanist, but yeah, but then also, you know, kind of at the same time, like, you know, suggesting or not suggesting, but you know, you can provide for your friends, you know, or for people, you know, if you have a cousin in a different state, you know what? Here's a little info and a popsicle. Do what you will, you know? I don't even know if I'm answering the question.
Yeah, no,
But I
that was
do feel
great.
like there are little ways, I don't know. Yeah. Wait, what was the question?
The question was how the reception has been to your writing
Oh,
about your abortion story. That's okay.
okay.
And just if it's differed from what your expectations were before you wrote and published and shared.
I would say that things have actually been, I think the reception to, I think writing about my abortion might be like, or my abortions might have been like more important than speaking about them. Like it was important to like just like say the word. I mean, shout your abortion is like shout your abortion. But also I think like just like getting, you know, I think it was very important to get like my family to like to have my mom not whisper abortion when she said it to me, to have her say it out loud. You know, that was important, but I think writing about it has been the most impactful thing that I've done. In my opinion. Sorry about my very long windedness there.
No.
What do the
please.
other
I
panelists
love
think?
Natalie, how's the reception
Was
been to your piece in
I was
Single Woman?
trying.
Okay. Hey. Oh, so yeah. So I mean, I'll talk. I can talk a little about it. I know Nicole had a huge piece out recently. I'd love to hear about her experience, but it's people with this essay, with writing about it and talking about it, I end up with private messages often. And, I think this is just sort of the nature of me, being a nonfiction writer, and people call me writing. I think people have called me confessional a little bit, a confessional writer. So I'm used to people reaching out to me privately to talk about, my sobriety, my sex life, or, like what other kind of dirty laundry I expose about myself. And so the one thing about this is like, it's always, it feels gendered, and so I'm always hearing from, cishet women privately about this. And the one thing that I always notice is that I very rarely hear from, cishet men about it. And so it's, that's sort of interesting to me. But it feels really good to be able to share the story with other people because, what I do realize is that we're all in a different space with how we talk about our own abortions and with dealing with shame or even publicly sharing ourselves. I feel so used to it writing about myself, but because most people don't write about themselves publicly, I realize like I have to be open and more gentle with others as they, feel free to share about themselves. And what it does for me is that it makes me feel really grateful and safe and not alone. And so that's why I do it. And, I hope that Other people feel the same when they hear from me. But yeah, so far it's all been good. I haven't had any protesters or anything. I haven't had somebody come for me yet. So so far it's been a positive experience.
Yeah, Nicole, your essay has recently moved to a bigger platform, I would say, in terms of readership. How has that reception been for you?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to echo what Natalie said. Like, as a nonfiction writer, you get so used to writing about yourself. Brenda Miller has this awesome essay in this collection, Bending Genre, that I edited. And she talks about how she was so busy with the craft, she really had no idea that she was being courageous in feeling things about her personality, because you're like, well, wait, is this a good transition? Hey, do you think that this metaphor working? You get so into the writing that it's sometimes really hard to imagine like what the reception will be. And I really love what Natalie said, like, because we're nonfiction writers, we can actually kind of be a little bit cold about, like the writing process. And so when people come to us with their stories, we have to remember that this is not their milieu, right? They do not spend their lives writing about themselves, and to send these notes, sharing, is incredibly important. And so yeah, I had the piece in the New York Times, and it was the reception has been amazing. I haven't had a single nasty comment. Now, admittedly, the New York Times people do a good job mediating, as you all do, to make sure that the really scary comments aren't coming through. There was some concern about you should have outed the guy, and that was a little bit like, it wasn't so troublesome as much as it was just like not quite the point. And you're like, okay, well, that's fine. You guys can talk about that over here. But what's been amazing is just hearing people's stories and people wanting to tell me about their abortions, and just being free to feel like I can tell you now, I can tell you because you told me. And to create that safe space has just felt so rewarding and gratifying. And I just in some ways, I feel like the mom to the world. Like, you can tell me, we have to share these stories, because the number of people who have had abortions, the number of people who've been affected by abortion, is probably most of us, right? And that the stigma, should never have existed. It's healthcare. It wasn't even made at stigma until the mid 19th century, right? It was just things people did for themselves and their bodies, and people got a hold of our bodies as a political tool and as an example of morality. And it's just, the people are suffering. And so to hear these stories and to feel like you are being heard, that is an amazing transformation that's happened in the past few weeks, that your story matters, and that telling your story reaches people. It's been transformative and gratifying and hard too. There's been a lot of really sad stories that I've heard, and there is a lot of grief. I really appreciate what Alana said about how there is still grief, and to say that there's not, trouble necessarily is to, or discomfort or sadness or loss, right, is to, sound like you're working for the other side. And, it shouldn't be like that. It's in the essay, Abortion Isn't Beautiful, which is, I try to trouble the word beautiful. Like, what is beautiful? Of course, people don't think abortion is a beautiful thing, but maybe we could, maybe we should, maybe we could imagine different ways of what is beauty, and I say, death isn't beautiful, or death can be beautiful, right? We have poignant stories about how beautiful it is to transition to a different space, a different place, and to think about a mental shift about what it means to grieve, and what it means to choose, and what it means to feel empowered. These to me are like newly connected terms that suddenly it feels free to talk about because publishing these pieces. I'm grateful to the people who have given that audience and let that audience happen, especially Choice Words and the New York Times. It's been really great.
Yeah, I'm so glad it's been positive. And that's such a I love what you said about just letting all the conversations in, because abortion is right. It's older than the Supreme Court. It's older than the Catholic Church. It's older than any laws that have been made about it. And so we can put these newer, smaller frameworks around it and containers around it, but it's going to expand its way out of those containers every time. So that's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing, Nicole. I'm wondering if any of you have felt seen or understood or represented in other pieces of writing about abortion, and have kind of felt connected or felt like your experience was connected to other writers and how they've written about abortion.
Yeah.
Nicole, do you
I
want to
mean,
start?
the beautiful, Choice Words is a compendium. It's a huge book that, of course, I left at school. But it's 400 some odd pages of people talk. Thank you. It's and a history of people talking about abortion. And, in the same way, this is another thing that Natalie had said, that she hadn't heard from very, very many cis men about abortion. And of course, in Choice Words, there's no words from men, which might be unfortunate. Maybe that would be a good secondary, volume 2. But I have heard from an array of men who have just been so supportive, so worried, so ready to, just march and get involved. So, right, to know that I'm in a history of women, that one of my first poems that I've memorized, because I ran, Anne Sexton wrote, it's just a beautiful, beautiful poem that ends, it's kind of callous at the beginning, and then it ends, this baby that I bleed, right? And so there's always, I just, again, really appreciate what Alana said, that there is the potentiality of grief, that you don't necessarily have, that the emotions around abortion are complicated, and the stories around abortion are complicated in the same way stories about pregnancy are complicated, in the same way stories about prostate cancer are complicated, right? The idea of being able to present these stories as a lineage, as a history of women's experience that is so nuanced and so complicated, it's I'm not going to quite say it's a gift, because it's not necessarily like I said about the New York Times article. I didn't want to write that piece, but I felt like I had to write that piece. That necessity and desire and this idea about what the future means, and the idea about what free will is all tied up in this idea and of what abortion is. And I'm grateful that people have made it as nuanced and complicated as they have.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a really deep, rich lineage, and luckily we do have some men's stories about their abortions. We have incredible men like Kazembe Murphy-Jackson of We Testify, and he's written about his abortion in all different media. And so, and I think Langston Hughes has some beautiful words on abortion in these anthologies that are I didn't know he had written about abortion, so that was exciting for me. And yeah, Natalie, do you want to field this question as well? Have you seen yourself or your abortion experiences represented, or have you felt seen or understood by other writers?
Not enough. And it's always nice to hear other writers writing about abortion. I actually just read, what is it? Crying in the Bathroom by Erica L. Sanchez.
Mhm.
And she has a chapter here about an abortion she had in her 30s. And, part of the guilt that she had is a huge part of it, and how the guilt of feeling guilty. And so I found that I really enjoyed that, hearing that story, because I've seen there's so many other weird narratives, or not weird, I don't say weird, but creative narratives around abortion. I think like fictionalized. Like I remember there was like a storyline on Girls about it, and I just like think the way people write about it always kind of. I mean, I think people can write about it in like weird ways if they haven't experienced it, like when they're trying to write it in like a fictional sense. And so, it's always really nice to hear stories from women of color, working class women, folks who grew up in the margins. Having gone through a nonfiction MFA, you're a lot of the times, most of the time, the people in my cohort are from white upper middle class families. And so, obviously those stories are super important to you, but it's really, really important to me to be able to hear stories from people that aren't in MFA programs, for example.
Yeah, beautiful. Alana, have there been other writers who you feel like have their depictions of abortion or their thoughts around abortion have you felt connected to or represented by or seen and understood by?
I did my undergrad in classical studies, and so I actually read some accounts of just like, of men kind of chronicling. I'm answering this in a very roundabout way, but of like these chronicles of like women sharing recipes with each other, of helping each other out, like before, like, men decided they were going to be doctors, and like that was a real thing, because women didn't trust men who were doctors. And I'm a woman today. I identify as a woman. I still don't trust men as doctors, so I get it. But I would say that like part of what's been very interesting for me in my scholarship has been like just reading these accounts that seem like, women like don't trust men, but really it's like, no, she wanted an abortion and she had to talk to, this kind of information had to be, this had to be exchanged verbally, like maybe a little recipe written on something tiny that may or may not arrive, but that's what we got. And then others, like, I really love Rebecca Wolf. I read her book, Girls Gone Child, when I was like a teenager, and then she just wrote a book about her. She decided to not have an abortion. I guess I actually read a lot about people who choose to have children, or choose parenthood, more than I actually read about people who have abortions, because I guess I like know that's the experience. That's what I know. I know a lot of people who have abortions, who have had abortions. It's not like, in my community in Seattle, it's like, you having a hard time with an abortion? Like, I'm your guy. Like, everybody knows that they can come to me to talk about that. Like, I recommend the books. I think sometimes I just like to, regarding the grief that I mentioned earlier, and maybe it's not even, maybe it's a stage of grief, and maybe it's okay to call it that. I don't know. But sometimes I just like to read about people who chose parenthood, and like just reading about like the struggle of like learning what they find. I can kind of like mine the emotional experience without having, the, I guess, responsibility yet until I'm ready. But yeah, so I actually think I read more about people who chose to become parents, or women who decided to, like, this is important, this is the one, and I get like,
Yeah.
I think like also like just the questioning of that experience is also just very I don't know, very human. It's not even like just like a lady problem. It's very much like, what kind of life do we want?
Yeah. And it's all on a spectrum, right? Like when you are pregnant, you're in this like liminal state, and you're kind of touching death, and you're kind of touching like several different new futures all at once. And you have to, there's so much that goes into a pregnancy outcome. And I think it's very, very rare that it's a very straightforward decision and someone is like, never wonders about the other paths they could have taken. I think that's pretty rare in any pregnancy outcome. So I think it's really beautiful to kind of explore, even after a pregnancy has ended, like all those other universes in which that pregnancy existed and had a different outcome, for sure. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it seems like an important like exploration of like, the human experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
What?
So there are some questions in the chat. One of them is asking if you all are writing fiction or nonfiction, and Natalie answered that one. It's pretty much all nonfiction. Are any of you writing any fiction? No, me neither. Me neither. That is an alternate universe that I do not live in.
Maybe when the world like stops, like, starts spinning at the rate it used to.
Right. Right. And then another question is, any books that you all recommend that are about the experiences of, it says women, I'm going to say people prior to Roe decisions, which I assume means like the original Roe v. Wade ruling, Planned Parenthood v. Casey, and then I'm assuming this means before abortion became a federally protected right. So I don't know if you all have any recs for any of those pre-Roe documentation of abortion experiences.
I have two funny stories, or one regular story, one funny story. So I don't have any books about pre-Roe versus Wade that strike my memory, but the Janes, the HBO documentary, is pretty amazing about these women who created a network of doctors and doulas to provide abortions for women pre Roe versus Wade. But then I remember I had this terrible book when I was a kid called Mr. and Mrs. Bojo Jones. And it was all about this woman who got pregnant accidentally with her boyfriend Bojo. And they went on to have the baby. Then her buddy, Leanne, got pregnant too and had an abortion. And she just came to the house one day and she was just like, she had these dark circles in her eyes and she just looked like the life had gone out of her, and just a sign that we were not supposed to go that path. We were supposed to have the baby. And, she sang this really like sad song. So, it was written into that literature, and I'm sure I read this book in the 80s. I don't know exactly when it was written, but, in the end of the book, the baby dies anyway. Like, what is the point of this novel? But I'm thinking about how deeply it ingrained the idea of going ahead and having the child and your life will be fine is in a lot of media, and that it just does not happen in movies. And it does. There are instances. There was on Pod Save America, there was when did the first abortion take place in television or movies? And it was a long time ago. It was the 50s, but it's just not part of our regular parlance, right? It's not part of our regular experience. And I think that's a problem. And again, I'm hoping that now that people are speaking loudly, speaking out about their abortions, the people are just more willing to put that in the narrative, because it is a fact of life. And like I said earlier, most people we know have had an abortion or know somebody who has, and it is a normal part of healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like conflating legality with, actual access and reality. Like I am privileged enough to know some folks who are old enough to have had abortions before the Roe v. Wade decision. And it wasn't always this dramatic, dark of the night, dangerous, covert operation. Like, abortion has been a very ordinary fact of life since there has been life, right? Like abortion is as old as pregnancy, which is to say it's as old as humans. And so I think a lot of our narratives, have become very flattened or exaggerated in this way that I would love to see more of those folks' stories told, so that we can understand, moving forward, like what does this look like without legality? And it doesn't necessarily look big and dramatic and, like a suspenseful thriller movie. Yeah. Okay, great. So there are some great recommendations in the chat that I'll read aloud in case folks need that. So there's a book about the Janes, the Jane Collective, the story of Jane, which I definitely recommend for folks who haven't read up on the Jane Collective and the Janes doing that. And then I recommend Vanessa Hua's novel Forbidden City, about teenage companions who shared contraception and abortion methods with each other. Beautiful. Thank you so much. And I think, let me see, there may be, okay. There's a question in the chat about, it's kind of about the logistics and mechanics of writing an abortion story. So Phyllis is writing a memoir about my illegal traumatic abortion in Switzerland when I was 21. It won't be ready for publication until next year, but I want to start writing about it now, partly to build an audience and partly to take advantage of the current public discourse. I could blog or submit shorter articles to magazines, but I can't figure out what to write about without giving away the story in my book. Do you have any suggestions? I don't want to write about politics. I'm 73 now. So I would say it will be an inherently political story, which I love and I think is beautiful. You don't need to lean into the legality, legislative side of it, but it sounds like a really cool, important story to be told. And I don't know if Nicole or Natalie or Alana, if you're still on, if you have any advice about those potentially writing, shorter excerpts of this story before parlaying it into the full-length memoir.
Well, to me, I think you can just keep writing it. Like the suggestions or the forms that you suggest, like a blog is really different than an article, that's really different than a short essay. It's really different than a whole book. And you're going to get different audiences, right? No matter what you're writing about, because of the format. So most people, I don't think, would be, dismayed to have read an essay about abortion in a blog or in the New York Times, and then to find a different take on it in a book, right? Because you're going to have different angles, different ways of presenting the information, depending on the medium. So I would just go forth with all the media that you can find and say, I'm going to tell the story in this short, personal, diary-like way for my blog, and I'm going to write it in a particularly political way in this essay for the New York Times, and I'm going to write about it in this really long, extended essay for long reads or Guernica. Just try the different formats and to see, how that informs the entire book and what it means to try to reach these different audiences. I think it'll expand the whole book writing experience anyway.
Yeah. And Natalie, really quickly, I know we need to wrap it up, but you are someone who has written shorter form essays and, you know, personal pieces of your life. And you also are working on a memoir. And so I'm wondering if you, and also you're a writing professor and an expert. So I'm wondering if you have any advice. And it's okay if you don't, but just in terms of breaking that story up into pieces and then also, you know, sharing it long form.
I thought Nicole's advice was excellent.
Fair enough. ER,
She's
you want
a lot longer than I have.
Save Natalie from the bell. Save her from by the bell. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I do think that advice is excellent, and I think it's useful to shop little bits of your memoir out in lots of different ways, because that is actually how you build an audience. So, from my bookseller's opinion, it always helps if people have a little bit of traction out in the world before their book comes out, especially if it's their first book. So 100% agree with what Nicole said. Thank you all so much. This was a beautiful conversation, and it's a conversation obviously that is ongoing in all of our different cultural spaces, and certainly at Caris, we have many more events planned throughout the fall talking about abortion access. So we encourage you to stay connected to Caris. If you are not already on our newsletter, definitely please get on that. You can also follow us on social media at Caris Books and More on all platforms except Twitter, where we are at Caris Circle. And we'd love for you to just stay in touch. And it's always helpful to us to know what you enjoy. So we'll be adding this event to our YouTube channel in a couple of days. And you can let folks know that it's up and available. If there's anybody who missed it that, you know, would love to see this, please do share it. It is how we make these books known and these writers known, and that's really important. So you can buy the panelist books from us, which really does help us, by clicking this teal link that takes you to all their books. And if you want to support the work of Caris Circle, our nonprofit, a donation of any amount really does help us in our work. It's how we do as many programs as we do, and it helps us stay connected to all of these amazing organizations and people. So thank you all so much. I hope that you stay safe and well, and keep, you know, doing this incremental, fighting the good fight every single day. It is all we can do right now, and it's so important. And I have so much respect for all of you and all that you do. So thank you for being with us.